Welcome back to the Hill of Roses, where we come once again to celebrate the best contributors to our united progressive movement. With me today to be able to talk about her top three priorities is Megan Dunford. Megan, want to say hello out there to the folks out there?
Hi, I go by Mia actually, generally speaking.
Well, we will certainly call you by your nickname today, Maya. It's a pleasure to have you on today to be able to talk about your top three priorities. But before we get into those top three priorities, want to let the Rosebuds know a little bit more about yourself, where you're from, as well as what you do.
I live in Michigan. I'm a mother of two. One of them is a special needs child on the spectrum. He's cognitively disabled and verbally disabled. Um, Verbally disabled isn't the right word. Nonverbal. Jeez. Uh, I'm currently throwing myself at multiple different projects. I'm doing a speaking gig on the Yang Gang Roundtable for a podcast and trying to start my own Patreon, just generally trying to get myself out of poverty.
Oh, well, I feel you there. There's many avenues that we try to do to fill the full income that we need, and I'm very excited to be able to talk to you today, Maya. And thank you for being the mother that you are. It's such valuable work. I, growing up, was a nonverbal child for a very long period of time, so I can empathize with what your child is going through because I went through it myself. But with that being said, I am really excited to talk to you about your top priorities. There are some that are near and dear to my heart as well. The first of which is universal basic income, the second of which is universal health care, and the third of which is climate change. And I wanted to focus first on that first subject, the top priority for you, universal basic income. How did you come to become an advocate for universal basic income?
Well, I'd heard of it for a while before 2016, just people generally talking about it. And at first, like pretty much everybody, I'm like, well, I mean, that sounds great, but isn't it a little bit idealistic or utopian, that kind of thing. But overall, I didn't think that it was worth being so pessimistic about it. And I started looking into it deeper. And around then I started thinking, this actually could work and it should be tried whether or not it makes sense with our current models or not anyways, because there's too many people suffering and there's more than enough resources for everybody. So why are we letting people, you know, suffer in
Yeah,
general?
yeah.
And I kind of just thought that I was alone in that thought, other than a few people here and there, and I wasn't really advocating for it until I discovered Andrew Yang this year in 2020 and saw that, oh, it's not just me being a dreamer. There's a lot of people out there who really want to see this happen. There's some really good ideas on how to make it happen, and from there, you know, if I had three wishes from a genie, one of them would be to end all poverty so that nobody would ever starve or live on the streets again. And so I'm fighting for that constantly now.
Well, I think that's a great reason to be fighting for universal basic income as a solution. And I have to say, I'm kind of like you in a large respect. I had heard about the idea, largely liked the idea, similar time frame around 2016, thinking we should try it out. But we all kind of started coming out of the woodworks a little bit more once Andrew Yang's campaign really took off and made it so that we had a rallying point to come around. When you heard of Andrew Yang and his specific version of a universal basic income, did you have any reservations about it, or did you think that he got that silver bullet and got it right when he designed his universal basic income?
Well, the first time I heard about it, specifically, I was in a Facebook group for Bernie supporters,
Mm,
and they were not very kind about it. But since I had an active interest in it already, it got me looking into it. And I was pretty pro Yang already. That put him at third. And then when I started reading about the VAT and just how easy it is to tailor, all of the things that he's shown us about how that could work, I was like, yes, we need to do this. And yeah,
yeah.
I just fell in love there.
Yeah, I come from a similar background, also coming from Bernie Sanders before joining Andrew Yang, and I think that certainly colored the initial impression. I think the big things when they looked at that version of a universal basic income is, as you said, the VAT, the value added tax. At first, I was skeptical of that, as I think a lot of people in Bernie's movement, they kind of call it a regressive tax. And I kind of had bought into that at first. And similarly, I had bought into the idea that the opt in to the program, the Freedom Dividend, was somehow a negative drawback because I didn't know fully well at the time of our means tested welfare system and some of the problems with that. When it came to universal basic income, what do you think about that is more specifically the right answer to the problem of poverty? Because I think from what you've said so far, ending poverty is the end goal. Why do you believe universal basic income is the right tool to do that?
Well, I can tell you that the tools we have right now, from experience, are completely insufficient. Uh, from what I've read, and I believe it from how hard it is to get into these programs, only one third of the people who even qualify for them get into them. So it's not like our safety net is actively covering everybody as it is. I've got a family of four. We're getting less than $600 to feed ourselves for the entire month. And Tristan is, like I said, on the far end of the spectrum. He can't even go to school. They kicked him out.
Mm.
And it takes both me and my husband to be able to care for him at home, especially if he's having one of his bad days. And we can't bring in a proper income. And a lot of people are in that situation or worse, where, they've got somebody they've got to care for who the system doesn't recognize their disabilities as easily or simply and doesn't get them into the process. So it just doesn't work the way it is. And I think that if you gave people money in general, they could figure out how to take care of themselves pretty well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the first point you made is really important that the current safety net just has too many holes in it. And that you have too often these people who need the help, these caregivers, who are being completely unrecognized. I'd be curious, do you support a child UBI? I know that's one of the reasons why you said it would be really helpful for you. I know Yang does not currently provide his version to extend to children. Do you think that we should be giving a universal basic income to children as well?
I wouldn't mind that. I think that it's a good idea. I think starting somewhere is more important than, criticizing somebody for not having it. But yeah, I think that should be added eventually.
Yeah, I go back and forth on this. I tend to lean towards yes, we should do it. I worry about some of the having like adopting kids for that purpose or having kids for that purpose. If there was a universal basic income for kids, do you think it should be at the same level as the one for adults?
I saw somebody has a plan. One of the people on the UBI caucus, I can't remember which one it is, but it includes $500 per child.
Mm.
And I think that's probably about right. It shouldn't be like kids have different needs, but a parent can provide for them to an extent.
Yeah, no, I feel you there. I kind of am in a similar boat where I think $500 makes sense. And I think that there was a similar proposal that was made in Congress by Michael Bennett. I think it was the American Families Act that was, I think it was maybe $300. But I think we definitely need some form of a children's UBI. Are there any other forms of adaptations that you wish you had seen in Yang's version of a UBI, the Freedom Dividend?
I'd like him mostly to clear up some of the, well, previously he's suspended now, so it's really kind of moot.
Yeah.
But I would have liked to have seen him clarify some of the stances on Social Security because that stuff got confusing. There were multiple versions
Hmm.
out. And just to have him come out and say directly what does and what does not stack himself in one good sitting would have been great.
I think that's so true. I think a lot of the clarity could have easily been listed as like a bulleted list. You keep this, you don't keep this. And I think the fact that we had to rely on the Yang Gang itself to communicate that out there was kind of a hindrance. But as you kind of mentioned, Yang's now suspended his campaign. What do you think is one of the best ways people can now rally behind advocating for a universal basic income?
Well, obviously, he started Humanity Forward, which is going to, on top of helping candidates who want to promote UBI actually give out some for pilot programs, so you can always donate there. There's also the UBI caucus, which is people who have committed to signing any legislation that comes into Congress that would have a UBI. And there's, I lost track of my thoughts. Hold on. Yeah, I'm not going to get it back. Sorry. That's where I got it.
Oh, no worries. I mean, I think you were probably maybe thinking of like the income movement. That's something very specific for that. They had done like marches all over the country. I only bring that one up because I'm a volunteer for that. So I think that's certainly a great way people can go become
Yes.
more active in advocating for universal basic income. But with that being said, before we get into your number two top priority, universal healthcare, I wanted to make sure that there's nothing that I've missed. Is there anything about the subject of universal basic income that you think we should discuss that doesn't get enough discussion?
I think that a lot of people criticized it to an extent for being literally universal. A lot of people said, why should we be giving to people who have enough? One, it is opt-in, so you'd have to actually want the money to go get it. And I don't think a lot of people who are making over a certain amount are going to be motivated the same way as people who are living in poverty or above poverty
Yeah.
to a certain extent are. And I don't really see anything wrong with me getting $1,000 to help my family out and a middle class family that's doing a lot better than me getting an extra $1,000 to send their kid to tutoring or for piano lessons or something that enriches their life, you know?
Yeah, and I honestly think of it this way. Is it worth the cost of the administration to start checking that type of thing? Where, you're going to have the people, I think like Tulsi Gabbard's the best example of this, candidate still in the race, has a proposal
Mm-hmm.
out there for a universal basic income, except it's really just basic income, because it's for only those that are making less than $200,000 a year. You have to ask yourself the question, is it worth checking that fact that you have less than $200,000 a year to receive the income? You now have to have people fill out the forms. The people who are poor, who are trying to get this money, they now have to do an extra step. You have to hire the people who are doing the admin work, who are checking to see, okay, they filled out the form. Is it accurate? Was it filled out correctly? Is the information on here truthful? So I think all those factors makes it, as you said, it's so important to just give it universally to everyone. So I'm glad you brought that point up, because I think in general, programs are better when they are universal. And I think that makes even more sense as we get into your second topic on universal healthcare, of why it's so important to have these universal programs. So, folks, we'll take a quick break here, but we'll be back in part two so that we can talk about universal healthcare with Megan, or Mea, as we all learned today.